The protagonist was Athanasia, whose name meant eternity. She was a princess, the daughter of the emperor and empress, who had lost her life in childbirth. Before dying, Diana, her mother, left her a magical kiss, although it's unclear what exactly she passed on to her daughter. After the empress's death, the emperor ordered everything burned and destroyed, leaving only the child, Princess Athanasia. The problem was that the emperor showed no affection for her, leaving her in the care of servants who also didn't care, thinking, if even her father ignores her, why should we pay attention? Since she was a baby, Athanasia had managed to enter a magical world, where a mysterious voice called to her. There, she found a book in which she could see her entire life. So, everything that will happen to me is already written here, she reflected, astonished. The book revealed that, when she grew up, she would be accused of using black magic, and her own father would condemn her to exile in a tower, never to leave. The princess lived in a world where everyone possessed magic, but she did not. Her father's cold, distant gaze transformed the premonition into a true nightmare, repeated every night in her dreams. Fortunately, there was someone who cared for her with affection. Lillian. This servant had been a friend of her mother's and, although of noble birth, had abandoned everything to remain in the palace with Athanasia. She was the only one who treated her well, protected her, and paid attention to her. Even as a baby, Athanasia was already aware of the future and knew that dangers surrounded her. Although she could not defend herself, she understood that she would need to find a way to change the course of her life. Her greatest obstacle was Claude, the emperor, considered by all to be extremely powerful. He can destroy an entire kingdom single-handedly. And that's my father, the little princess thought in frustration. 3 years passed, and the atmosphere around the girl had become more welcoming. Many new maids came to work there, enchanted by the sweetness and beauty of Athanasia, now 3 years old. However, among them was one who was only interested in money, while the others dedicated themselves to making the place beautiful with flowers and decorations. This maid watched secretly, searching for valuable objects the emperor had purchased for the late empress. One day, Athanasia approached and asked what she was looking for. The servant, believing her to be merely a gardener's daughter, replied, "Show me somewhere where there is gold." Athanasia, silently, thought, "She just wants to steal." Then she led her to the sunflowers, the wheat, and the fresh bread, pretending not to understand what she really wanted. Then, with calculated innocence, she commented that there were no great treasures left in the palace, but that there were still utensils adorned with precious stones. The servant was surprised by the girl's intelligence, believing they both shared the same interest in stealing, unaware that she was standing before the princess. When the maid entered the kitchen and began filling bags with jewelry and ornaments, Athanasia went up to where they were stored and put everything in her pockets. The woman tried to attack her, demanding that she return them, but the princess threw all the arrangements and decorations they had set up on her. The noise attracted the other maids, who caught her trying to harm the child. She was soon removed from the palace. However, Athanasia knew it wasn't by chance. She thought, if I hadn't acted like that, Lillian would have been attacked tonight. Indeed, in her vision of the future, the same servant tried to rob and stab Lillian. Therefore, it had all been done on purpose, keeping the recovered jewels for herself. Athanasia reflected that she would need them in her future, knowing the cruel fate that awaited her. Meanwhile, Claude continued his duties as emperor. Felix, his assistant, reported that someone had attempted to break into his daughter's home, and that the girl had successfully thwarted the threat. He expected a reaction from the sovereign, but Claude remained indifferent. In another distant place, a man sensed that something in the fate of the Obelia Empire was changing, and that the source of this was the palace. Through the book, Athanasia understood that she was merely a secondary character in that story. In her dreams, she already knew she would meet her father when she was 8. He will be the only family I have left, she thought. From that moment on, she would begin her effort to impress him, yearning to be by his side. However, without magic, this goal seemed unattainable. The worst would come at age 12, when she was introduced to society. At that moment, she would discover a painful truth. Her father also had another daughter, named Jeanette. She was a graceful princess, charming in appearance, possessed of a natural elegance, and possessed magical abilities. Perhaps she had even, at some point, received her father's love. Precisely for these reasons, little Athanasia did not want to experience a cruel fate. Nor did she wish to be rejected or exiled. Therefore, before her 8th birthday, she had been carefully gathering all the coins and jewels she could save, thinking that, when the time came, she would be able to escape her father and live in peace. In her plans, it would not be just her who left. Lilium would also accompany her, supporting her, and together they would take all the treasures Athanasia had accumulated since childhood. While reflecting on this, she ended up staining her fingers with chocolate, as she always took the opportunity to ask the maids for sweets and desserts. It was not just for pleasure, but also because she hid gems and jewels in the kitchen utensils. After eating, she went to a fountain to wash her hands, and there she could see her own reflection. Her face strongly resembled her mother's, but her eyes were the emperor's, eyes that shone like precious stones. Athanasia thought that perhaps it was precisely because she had inherited only the look and not the magic that her father despised her. Maybe he hates me for that, he mused silently. Walking through the forest, she came to a spot where she hid her jewelry, unintentionally startling a passing squirrel. Continuing on, she found a place that looked nothing like the ruby palace where she lived. It was like a vast, empty vault. Back at the palace, she heard from the maids that His Majesty the Emperor had ordered an inspection of every room after the incident with the maid who had tried to rob him. They also said they would search every corner of the princess's room, where she kept her precious treasures. Worried, Athanasia decided to act quickly. She put the jewels on herself and headed for the forest to hide them with the rest. However, upon arriving, she found the same squirrel digging and trying to unearth what she had buried. I can't lose this, she thought, handing it a peanut to distract it, and running in search of another hiding place. Arriving again at the place that resembled a vault, she decided to leave everything there. As she walked deeper, she found small golden figures shaped like cherubs. Could they be real gold, she thought, running toward them and even biting one to confirm. It was at that moment that she came face to face with Claude, the emperor, her own father. It was the first time he had seen her in so long, and he immediately noticed the resemblance to the empress. For Athanasia, it was a shock. I wasn't supposed to meet him until I was 8. What's going on? She thought, frightened. Claude wasn't a caring man, and his expression made it unclear what he would do next. Felix, who was nearby, looked concerned when he saw the little girl before the sovereign. The emperor tried to remember her name, the name he had heard from the servants when the empress had passed away. Approaching Athanasia, he surprised everyone by saying, almost casually, that she was chubby, firmly pulling her cheeks. He then ordered Felix to prepare tea, as he would be having tea with his daughter. Something sweet was served, but Athanasia remained in shock. To her, this man was the same man who would, in the future, hate her, exile her, and condemn her for black magic. What she saw before her seemed impossible. Claude, for his part, watched her silently, hesitantly, wondering if she would be able to speak. Yes, she can, Athanasia replied timidly, while Felix explained that small children could feel shy around strangers. Angered, Claude expelled Felix so he could be alone with his daughter. The emperor then commented on her name. He said that Athanasia was a grand name, laden with meanings such as eternity and immortality, worthy of heirs to the throne. Not even I was given such an imposing name, he confessed, remembering that it was not his son destined to inherit power, but rather his brother, the true successor, who had become a tyrant. Claude had murdered him and, as a result, had ended up taking the throne. This troubled him deeply, for, although emperor, he did not possess a name as noble as his own daughter's. Thinking of Diana, the empress, his expression changed. Remembering how she had chosen the name Athanasia, he asked who had taught her how to behave, and the girl replied that it was Lilium. Claude then revealed that he remembered the day Lilium had come running to him, asking permission to care for the princess, something he had accepted. Soon after, the emperor asked a direct question. He wanted to know if Athanasia knew who he was. Confused, she didn't know how to respond. Call him your majesty, father? Without much thought, she blurted out, in a sweet voice, that he was her father. Oh, I messed up. He must punish me for this, she thought distressedly. But Claude's reaction was unexpected. His eyes shone, as if he had enjoyed hearing his daughter call him that. Felix eventually led Athanasia back to the servants, who were eagerly searching for her. he informed everyone that His Majesty would certainly wish to see her again, which surprised the servants. Soon, Athanasia and Lilium were summoned to Claude, who thanked the maid for caring for the girl all these years. Athanasia, inwardly, couldn't believe it. He never cared about me. How can he act like this now? She thought, constantly remembering the future she knew. But in the present, Claude claimed he couldn't care for her because the responsibilities of the throne took him away, and that from then on she would live by his side, under his protection, like a true princess. The news delighted everyone around her, except Athanasia herself, who still believed her father was a demon in disguise. From then on, her routine changed. Every day she drank tea with Claude, received the treatment befitting her position, and was accompanied by attentive maids. However, deep inside her, her desire remained the same. Before she turned 8, she would escape that place with everything she had gathered. Claude, on the other hand, became increasingly intrigued by his daughter. He discovered that she loved shiny things and began to grow closer. Thus began the days when Athanasia visited her father. Nervous in his presence, she made small mistakes, blurting out awkward gestures that, despite themselves, seemed charming. Claude didn't scold her or blame her. On the contrary, he seemed to enjoy it, and it was at this point that a spark of hope arose in Athanasia. Perhaps, somehow, her father would come to love her. Then came the invitation for a trip to the lake. Lilium carefully prepared Athanasia, making her even more beautiful. With Felix by their side, they met Claude again, who, upon seeing her, commented that she looked increasingly healthy and plump. To any older princess, this would have been offensive, but to Athanasia, who was only 5, it still sounded like a compliment. Athanasia never quite knows how to behave around him, but she ends up saying he's also very handsome. Whenever she says something like that, or simply addresses him, everyone around her tenses, watching the cold, heavy gazes Claude gives her. Still, the day seemed to have a special air. They remain in the garden, surrounded by flowers, and Athanasia enjoys every moment, feeling happy until it's time to board the small boat, reserved just for her and Claude. Deep down, she feels a certain fear. After all, she can't swim. Felix tries to reassure her that nothing bad could happen, as she would be by her father's side. However, he regrets speaking so quickly when he sees Claude holding the girl as if she were some burden, without the slightest delicacy. The atmosphere becomes uncomfortable. He can't find the right words, but seeing Claude's golden locks moving in the wind, Athanasia shyly comments that his hair is radiant and very beautiful, adding that she loves it too. Deep down, the girl recognizes that he truly is beautiful, a deep honey blonde, but at the same time, she can't erase the memory that he will be the one to condemn her to exile. Silently, she wonders how that boat moves without oars, until she notices that Claude seems to be steering it with magic. When she looks into his eyes, she discovers they are incredibly blue, clear as 2 sapphires, and wonders if her own would be similar. Suddenly, a small, glowing lotus catches her eye. She even smells a gentle scent. She wants to reach out and touch it, but as she overextends herself on the edge, she loses her balance and falls into the water. Within seconds, algae and aquatic plants wrap around her body, dragging her down into the depths. Athanasia believes this could be the end, even though she already knows how her story will end. The desire still rises in her heart for her father to dive in and save her. However, she remembers that clinging to hope can be futile. But it's Claude who jumps into the lake and rescues her. He pulls her out with a firm grip and, using his magic, casts a spell that dries her clothes. It wasn't meant to hurt her, just to protect her. His expression betrays irritation, not with her, but with the entire situation. Soon after, he declares to Felix that the next day he will teach his daughter to swim, as it would make no sense to leave her at the mercy of such danger. Felix watches in silence, feeling the weight of his words. However, Claude also seems to carry something dark within him, a kind of magical burden that affects him in ways still unknown. After this scare, Athanasia falls ill. She has a fever, but is cared for by Lilian, who explains that the lotuses are magical and often deceive their victims, luring them to the bottom of the lake through illusions. Confused, Athanasia asks why such dangerous things exist, and Lilian explains that only people without magic are affected. Since almost everyone in the castle is noble and possesses power, they needn't worry. It is then that Athanasia realizes the problem is that she is the most fragile. That same night, Claude returns to the lake. He walks to the center, where the lotuses float, and faces the strange presence that isn't quite a creature, but rather displays before him the image of Diana, Athanasia's mother. In Claude's thoughts, it's clear he's tried to stifle his feelings since Diana's death, erasing any emotion. However, now that he lives with his daughter, he realizes he feels no hatred. Felix also witnesses the scene, but Claude remains in control, refusing to allow the entity to harm him. He simply states that there are matters that need to be resolved. The next morning, a maid rushes to Athanasia's room to announce that there are many new servants. When they emerge, they find an entire group gathered, declaring that from now on they will all serve the princess. To top it all off, Felix kneels before her and announces that he will be Her Highness's temporary personal guard. Thus conclude the first 3 chapters of Princess Charming. These were chapters full of emotion and fun moments.